The auction block creaked under Mutha's feet as Dulla's voice rang out over the crowd. Sold to pay her father's debt. He grabbed her wrist and pulled her up in front of everyone. Dust swirled around her worn boots. The whole town of Rudruck stood watching, packed close in the square, their faces hungry for a show. Someone in the back laughed loud. "Who'd want her? Look at the size of her." More laughter followed, spreading through the crowd like fire through dry grass. A woman covered her mouth and giggled behind her hand. Children pointed. Mutha felt her face burn hot, but she did not cry. She had stopped crying for these people a long time ago. Dulla held up his hand for silence. $200, he said, grinning with greedy teeth. That's what her father owed the bank. Someone pay it and she's yours. Nobody moved. The silence stretched long and cruel. Mutha stared straight ahead at nothing, her chin lifted high, refusing to let them see her break. Then boots crunched through the dirt behind the crowd. People turned. A tall stranger walked forward, dust thick on his coat, a rifle slung across his back. His face was rough and sunburned, his eyes sharp under his hat. Whispers ran through the square. "That's the mountain man," someone breathed. "Jade Cannon. Ain't seen him in town in years." Jade did not stop walking until he stood right below the platform. He looked up at Mutha, not at Dulla. Not once did his eyes move away from her face. $200, Jade said, tossing a heavy pouch onto the platform. Coins clinked loud in the silence. "I'll pay it." Dulla's mouth fell open. The crowd gasped, then burst into fresh whispers. A big rough mountain man wanting her. Mutha's heart pounded hard in her chest. Jade reached up his hand toward her, steady and calm. "Come on down," he said quietly. "Nobody's laughing where we're going." The wagon wheels creaked over the rocky trail, climbing higher into the hills. Mutha sat stiff on the wooden seat, her hands gripped tight in her lap, waiting for the cruel words, waiting for the trick. Every man in Rudruck had one hiding behind his smile, sooner or later. But Jade only pointed at a hawk circling above the pines. "Good hunting up there," he said. "Rabbits run thick this time of year." He talked about his horses, his cabin, the cold winters coming. He never once looked at her the way the town did, like she was something to laugh at. Days passed at the cabin. Mutha found her own warm room, a stocked kitchen, a fire already crackling when she woke. "Nothing happens here you don't want," Jade told her the first night, and he kept his word every single day after. Slowly, without meaning to, something in Mutha's chest began to loosen. Then word came from town. A rider passed through with news, and Dulla's voice traveled with it, ugly and sharp. "He's only after her father's land," people whispered. "There's gold buried under it. He knew all along. Poor fool woman don't even see it." Mutha heard the words secondhand, but they cut deep anyway. That night she barely slept, staring at the ceiling, turning it over. Was it true? Was I fool enough to believe a stranger's kindness? The wedding day arrived cold and bright. The whole church filled up fast, more for gossip than blessing. Mutha walked the aisle in her plain white dress, chin lifted, though her stomach twisted tight with doubt. Jade stood waiting at the altar, watching her come, his eyes steady and warm. For one moment, looking at his face, her fear eased. Then the preacher opened his book, Dearly Beloved. A chair scraped hard against the floor. Dulla stood, jabbing his finger toward the front. "Stop this wedding," he shouted. "Somebody's got to tell her the truth before it's too late." The whole church turned. Mutha's heart dropped like a stone. "Stop this wedding," Dulla shouted again, striding down the aisle. He jabbed his finger at Jade. "This man is marrying you for your father's land. There's gold buried under it, and he's known it for weeks. Ask him yourself if you don't believe me." Gasps rippled through the church. Every head turned. Mutha's hands began to shake. She looked at Jade, silently begging him to deny it, to prove Dulla wrong. Jade did not shout. He did not even flinch. He walked calmly toward the front, reached into his coat, and pulled out a folded paper. "You're right about one thing, Dulla," Jade said, his voice low and even. "There is gold on that land. I found out weeks back from a surveyor friend 2 counties over." The church fell dead silent. Mutha's stomach dropped straight to the floor. "So it's true. I was a fool after all." But Jade kept talking. "That's exactly why I brought this." He unfolded the paper high for the whole room to see. "This is the deed to that land, signed this morning, not in both our names, in hers, Mutha's alone. Whatever gold sits under that ground belongs to her, and only her, whether she marries me today or walks straight out that door and never speaks to me again." The church erupted into gasps, but different this time. Shock, not scandal. Dulla's face turned white as paper. Jade turned his back on the stunned crowd and faced only Mutha. Slowly, he lowered himself down on one knee right there at the altar, taking her trembling hand in his rough, calloused one. "I never asked you to marry me for gold, Mutha," he said. "I asked because you're the only person who never made me feel small for living alone on a mountain, and I never wanted you feeling small either. That land is yours no matter what you decide right now. But I'm asking you, with everything I've got, to still choose me anyway." Mutha stood frozen, staring down at him, tears rising fast in her eyes. The whole church held its breath, waiting. Mutha stared down at Jade, still kneeling before her, his rough hand wrapped around hers. The whole church held its breath. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Even Dulla, pale and shaking near the door, stood frozen, waiting for her answer. Tears rolled down Mutha's cheeks, but they felt different this time. Not shame. Not the old hurt from years of laughter behind her back. Something warmer. Something she hadn't felt in a long, long time. She looked past Jade, out at the crowd, at Dulla's white, guilty face, at the same townsfolk who had laughed at her on the auction block just weeks before. Then she looked back down into Jade's steady eyes. "I choose you," Mutha said, her voice ringing loud and clear through the silent church. "Not for the land, not for any gold buried under it. I choose you because you're the first person who ever let me choose anything at all." The preacher wiped his own wet eyes and cleared his throat fast. "Well then," he said, his voice cracking, "let's finish this wedding." When Jade rose and kissed Mutha as his wife, the whole church broke into cheers. Hats flew into the air. The same people who had mocked her on that dusty auction block now clapped and cried together, swept up in something bigger than gossip. Dulla slunk out the back door in shame, and nobody in Rudruk ever saw him bother the couple again. Up on the mountain, Mutha and Jade built a real life together. The gold from her father's old land brought them comfort through hard winters, but it was never the reason for their happiness. What made their marriage strong was something no gold could buy. A man who saw a woman's true worth when the whole world only saw her size, and a woman who finally learned, after all those years of laughter and shame, that she deserved real love. And in Rudruk, folks still tell the story on cold nights by the fire, the day the rough mountain man knelt at the altar and stunned the whole town, not with his gold, but with the plain, honest kindness of his heart.